My fiancé shouted. He satisfies me. In ways you never could. I packed. That same hour. When she tried to sneak him into our bed again, I was already waiting. My name is David. I'm 27, work in IT support for a mid-sized firm, and live in a city where rent eats half your paycheck before you even notice. For the past 3 years, I thought I was building something solid with my fiancée, Marissa. We met at a volunteer event, of all places. She was helping organize a food drive for a local shelter. Her laugh was magnetic, her drive contagious. I thought she was different, grounded, ambitious, with a streak of humor that made any dull day lighter. At least, that's what I convinced myself to believe. Marissa liked the idea of stability, but not the grind that came with it. She had studied marketing, bounced between internships, and always told me she was waiting for the right opportunity. I didn't mind covering more bills in the meantime. I figured it was temporary, and I wanted her to have time to find her footing. I worked nights, took extra shifts, even learned to cook so she wouldn't have to stress about dinner. In my head, it was all part of the long game. Invest now, reap later. But sometimes, when you think you're investing, you're just getting drained. The first cracks appeared 6 months before the blow-up. Marissa started staying out late more often. Drinks with friends, networking mixers, Pilates at odd hours. Whenever I asked, she had quick answers. Too quick. I brushed it off. Nobody wants to be the paranoid boyfriend. Still, I noticed small changes. Perfume that didn't belong to me, muted text notifications, a password on her phone when she'd always left it open before. I convinced myself it was normal, that couples go through phases. But one night shattered all of that. It was a Thursday. I had just come home from work, exhausted. My shift had dragged on after a system outage, and all I wanted was food and quiet. Instead, I walked into a storm. Marissa was pacing the living room, arms crossed, jaw tight. She didn't even wait for me to sit down. "You don't listen to me anymore," she started. Her voice was sharp, clipped. "You're either working or tired. Do you even care about us?" I tried to answer calmly. I told her I was working for us, for the future, for everything she said she wanted, an apartment upgrade, a car, a honeymoon she kept daydreaming about. But the more I explained, the angrier she became. "You think throwing money at everything makes you a good partner?" she snapped. I should have stopped there. I should have walked away, cooled down. But fatigue makes you reckless. I said she wasn't pulling her weight, that she used finding herself as an excuse to avoid responsibility. The moment the words left my mouth, her eyes hardened. And then she screamed it. "He satisfies me in ways you never could." It wasn't just volume. It was venom, like she had been holding those words in, waiting for the perfect moment to wound me. The room went silent afterward. My ears rang, not from the sound, but from the weight of what she admitted. There was no confusion in her tone, no slip of the tongue. It was deliberate, a weapon thrown with precision. I stood there, staring at her. I expected her to backpedal, to claim it was anger talking, to show even a flicker of regret. Instead, she folded her arms and stared back, defiant. That's when something inside me went still. Not broken, just quiet. Like a switch flipping. I didn't yell. I didn't demand answers. I didn't even ask who he was. I walked into the bedroom, pulled out a duffel bag, and started packing. Shirts, jeans, socks, nothing more. My laptop, charger, wallet. The basics. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want her tears. She followed me, voice rising. "What are you doing? You're seriously leaving? Over this? You don't even want to talk about it." But I was already zipping the bag. "You wanted honesty," I said. My voice surprised even me. Calm, flat, like reading off a grocery list. "Now you have it." Her expression shifted. Panic flickered, then anger again. "Fine. Run away. You'll be back when you realize nobody else will put up with you." I slung the bag over my shoulder and walked out. The night air was cold, sharp. It cleared my head instantly. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe a friend's couch, maybe a cheap motel. But I knew one thing. I wasn't staying under the same roof as her. That first night, I barely slept. I lay awake replaying every moment of the past year, every late night, every excuse. All the signs were there, but I had ignored them. And the more I thought, the more I realized something. If she had been careless enough to say it to my face, it meant she had grown comfortable in the betrayal. Comfortable enough to assume I'd swallow it. That thought burned more than the infidelity itself. By morning, I wasn't just hurt, I was calculating. My mind shifted from heartbreak to logistics. Bills, lease agreements, shared accounts. We weren't married yet, but our lives were tangled in a dozen small ways. I decided, right then, to start untangling. Quietly, methodically. I called the utility companies and arranged to remove my name from the joint accounts. Electricity, water, internet, all shifted to her. I transferred my direct deposits into a new checking account she didn't know about. The savings account we had together? I withdrew my half, every cent documented and legal, leaving her balance intact so she couldn't accuse me of theft. I stopped by the leasing office during lunch. The manager knew me, professional, friendly. I explained I'd be moving out and asked to transfer primary responsibility for the lease to Marissa. She was already listed as co-tenant, so it was easy. I smiled, thanked him, and walked out with paperwork proving I was free of liability. Each step was clinical, deliberate. No emotion, no second-guessing. By the end of the day, I had cut every cord binding me to her. If she wanted independence, she could have it, along with the bills, the responsibilities, and the hollow apartment she once called ours. I checked into a budget hotel for the weekend. The place smelled faintly of bleach and cigarette smoke, but it was quiet. I sat on the stiff bed, scrolling through my phone, and thought about the next move. I wasn't going to chase her. I wasn't going to warn her. I was going to let her play out her little game, oblivious to the fact that I'd already removed myself from the board. But fate has a sense of timing. The very next evening, after work, I swung by the apartment one last time. I told myself it was to grab a few forgotten things, but part of me wanted closure. I parked a block away, walked up the familiar stairwell, and unlocked the door with my key. The lights were off, but I didn't step inside. Instead, I stood just inside the entryway, listening. Soft laughter drifted from the bedroom. Two voices. Hers, unmistakable, and a man's. I froze. Not from shock, but from the eerie sense of confirmation. She hadn't wasted a single day. Less than 24 hours after screaming her confession, she had him in our bed. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself not to barge in. Instead, I stepped back into the hall, heart pounding. For a split second, anger surged, a desire to storm in, drag him out, demand answers. But then I remembered the paperwork in my bag, the accounts I'd already closed, the independence I had reclaimed. That anger shifted into something sharper. Not rage, not grief. Strategy. I didn't knock. I didn't announce myself. I turned, walked down the stairs, and into the night. But as I did, a cold clarity settled over me. If she thought she could humiliate me, if she thought she could sneak her lover into the bed I paid for, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. And unlike her outburst, my revenge wouldn't come in a shout. It would come in silence, in timing, in precision. When she tried to sneak him into our bed again, she wouldn't find me absent. She'd find me waiting. The following days passed in a haze that wasn't really grief, but something colder, sharper. I wasn't spiraling, crying into a bottle, or texting her in desperation. Instead, I felt like I had stepped out of my own body and was observing everything from a vantage point above. Detached, yet more aware than ever. I moved into a short-term rental, one of those furnished places meant for traveling consultants. Plain beige walls, mismatched plates, a bed that squeaked when you turned over. It wasn't home, but it was temporary, and that was enough. I didn't decorate, didn't unpack beyond the essentials. It felt like a bunker, a base of operations rather than a living space. Every night, after work, I would sit on the stiff couch, laptop balanced on my knees, reviewing my plans. I wasn't just leaving her. I was dismantling the version of me that had been tied to her. Accounts already split. Lease liability transferred. Mutual friends? I didn't reach out. Let them hear her version first. The more she painted me as the villain, the sweeter the eventual collapse would be when truth surfaced. And then, of course, there was Gregory. The name came to me through simple observation. I still had a key to the apartment. Though I no longer lived there, I didn't immediately return it. That detail mattered. She thought she had privacy, thought she could parade him in and out like nobody would notice. But the universe has a way of aligning small cracks. One Tuesday night, I stopped by, lights on, music humming faintly from the Bluetooth speaker. Shoes by the door that weren't mine. A pair of heavy leather boots, polished but scuffed near the toes. Men's size 11, maybe 12. That detail stuck with me. I didn't announce myself. I slid the key into the lock, turned it just enough to test. The door opened soundlessly. From the hallway, I could hear their laughter, muffled through the bedroom walls. It wasn't painful anymore. It was data. Information to be stored, cataloged, and used later. When I slipped the door shut again, I noticed an envelope resting on the counter. Addressed to Gregory S. in block letters. A utility company bill. That was all I needed. A name. I didn't take the envelope. I didn't need to. I had enough. Back at my rental, I began a new folder on my laptop. Marissa. Inside, subfolders marked financial, lease, contacts, Gregory. Each filled slowly, deliberately, with observations, screenshots, records. Not because I planned to go to court or expose them in a dramatic showdown, but because power comes from information, and I wanted every thread woven into my hands. The funny thing about betrayal is how quickly it becomes routine. Within days, Marissa and Gregory fell into patterns. He parked his car 2 streets over, a dark blue sedan with a dent on the bumper. He carried groceries in brown paper bags, never plastic. He wore a jacket with his company's logo stitched on the back, some minor logistics firm. Every detail made him smaller, more ordinary. He wasn't some mythical rival. He was just a man, oblivious to the fact that the ground beneath him was already shifting. I didn't act immediately. Timing mattered more than action. Meanwhile, Marissa's life carried on as if nothing had changed. She posted selfies, dinner photos, girls' night, snapshots where Gregory's reflection appeared faintly in the glass behind her. It was almost laughable, her attempt at maintaining the facade of independence while tethered to him like a lifeline. She didn't realize yet that the financial support, the safety net, the comfort she took for granted, had vanished. Bills would catch up. Rent would double without my half. Friends would whisper when word spread. But I wasn't satisfied with simply walking away and watching her drown in debt. That would take too long. I wanted her collapse to be sudden, undeniable, and orchestrated with precision. So I set the stage. I returned to the apartment one Friday evening, just before they arrived. I had memorized their schedule by then. Gregory usually showed up around 7, arms full of takeout or wine. Marissa would buzz him in, they'd laugh down the hall, and the door would click shut behind them. This time, I went in early. My key still worked. The place smelled faintly of her perfume mixed with something masculine. Aftershave, cologne, or maybe just the stale scent of someone else's clothes on the bed. I didn't linger. I worked quickly. I gathered the last of my belongings, a few books, a framed photo of my parents, the winter coat I hadn't worn in months. Into a single suitcase they went, zipped tight, and placed by the door. Next, I removed my toothbrush from the bathroom, my mugs from the kitchen, my shoes from the closet. Every trace of me vanished in under an hour. Then, the subtle touch. I left an empty suitcase in the closet. Not mine. One I bought from a thrift store earlier that day. Cheap, worn, with a broken zipper. It sat in the corner, half open, like a shadow of abandonment. A symbol without explanation. The bed, stripped of my side, looked oddly lopsided. I smoothed the sheets anyway, not for them, but for me, to mark the clean break. And finally, I sat down in the chair by the window. Lights off. The room cloaked in the dim glow of street lamps filtering through blinds. I didn't move. I didn't scroll my phone. I waited. At 7 sharp, laughter echoed down the hall. Keys jingled. The door unlocked. They entered, oblivious. Gregory's voice was deeper than I'd imagined. Marissa's giggle was forced, almost shrill, like she was trying too hard to impress. Shoes shuffled across the hardwood. A bag rustled onto the counter. And then, the bedroom door opened. I didn't react. I didn't stand. I sat in the chair, facing the window, back partially turned toward them. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats before Marissa's laugh cut off abruptly. Gregory's footsteps halted. The air shifted, heavy with realization. They weren't expecting me. They had written me off already. I heard her whisper something, low, urgent, but didn't catch the words. Gregory muttered in response, uneasy. Then, finally, she said my name aloud. I didn't answer. I let the silence do the work. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The longer I sat unmoving, the more the tension knotted in the room. Marissa shifted, probably wringing her hands. Gregory cleared his throat once, then twice. Finally, I rose. Slowly, deliberately. I turned just enough for the light to catch my face. Expression calm, unreadable. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. Instead, I lifted the suitcase by the door, the one with my belongings, and rolled it out into the hall. The wheels clicked softly on the floor, each sound louder than words. As I stepped into the hallway, I paused. My voice was steady, low, and final. The lease is yours now. Bills too. Consider this place exactly what you wanted, yours alone. Then I left. Behind me, the apartment door hung open, silence swallowing whatever frantic conversation followed. Outside, the night air felt different this time. Not heavy, not suffocating. Crisp, like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. I didn't look back. That night, back in my rental, I sat on the bed and stared at the ceiling. My hands weren't shaking. My chest didn't ache. The fury that might have consumed me days ago had been replaced by something else entirely, clarity. They thought the confrontation was the end. They believed my quiet exit marked closure. But in truth, it was only the opening move. Because betrayal doesn't end when you walk away. It lingers, festers, grows legs of its own. And if left unchecked, it infects everything around it. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to let it spread, to her reputation, her finances, her social circle, until she was surrounded by the very consequences she had mocked me with. And she wouldn't even realize I was the one pulling the strings. The next morning, I made a list. Not of what I had lost, but of what she still had left to lose. By the end of that list, I was smiling. After that night in the apartment, I knew I had shifted the balance without even raising my voice. Marissa and Gregory thought they had won. She had traded up, found a man she could flaunt, and as soon I'd slink away into obscurity. But reality is less forgiving than fantasy. When you strip away the cushions of comfort, people are forced to reveal who they really are. For Marissa, that process began within a week. Rent was due. Our lease wasn't cheap, and I had been carrying most of the weight before. With my name removed, the entire sum was now her responsibility. Gregory might have bragged about his job when trying to impress her, but I had already done the math. His salary, combined with her inconsistent freelance income, barely covered essentials. The apartment itself became a financial chokehold. Bills piled up. The utilities, once automatically deducted from my account, now sat in her inbox with red due dates flashing. The Wi-Fi was cut off briefly before she scrambled to pay it with a credit card. The electricity followed, a warning notice slapped to the door that neighbors couldn't help but notice. I didn't interfere directly. I didn't need to. I had already shifted the dominoes, and gravity was taking care of the rest. But financial strain was only the first crack. The social fallout came next. Marissa's circle of friends had always been more like an audience than a support network. They thrived on appearances, Instagram stories, dinner parties where the wine cost more than the rent, and whispered gossip about who was on the rise or falling off. For years, she had presented me as the stable partner, the man who worked late but made life comfortable, the foundation beneath her curated image. When I left quietly, she had to fill the silence with her own narrative. From what I later heard, she told them I was controlling, absent, emotionally cold. Some believed her, at least at first. But rumors have a way of mutating. Screenshots of her girls' nights revealed Gregory's shadow in the background. Neighbors whispered about a man seen entering our apartment days after I supposedly left. And when a few of those friends compared notes, the picture grew clear. Marissa wasn't the victim. I made sure of that. I didn't spread lies. I didn't have to. Instead, I slipped anonymous envelopes into the mailboxes of people who mattered to her, her parents, her cousin, even her old mentor from her internship. Inside were simple things: copies of rent notices in her name, receipts showing withdrawals from our joint account with dates circled, photos of Gregory's car parked outside the apartment week after week. No commentary, no accusations, just evidence. Enough for anyone reading to draw their own conclusions. And they did. Her parents stopped answering her calls for a while. Her cousin unfollowed her online. Her mentor rescinded a recommendation she had been bragging about for months. All the while, Gregory's patience wore thin. At first, he must have felt triumphant. He was the chosen one, the man she claimed satisfied her better. He had the thrill of sneaking into a bed I once shared with her, the excitement of being the forbidden lover elevated to official partner. But that thrill doesn't pay rent. That thrill doesn't cover grocery bills when her spending habits spiral and her credit cards max out. I watched it unravel like a slow-motion collapse. One evening, I parked across the street from the apartment. Through the thin curtains, I saw them arguing. Her gestures sharp, his shoulders slumped. A week later, Gregory's car was absent on nights it used to be there. The following week, it was gone entirely. She had bet on him being her escape route. Instead, he had seen the trap she lived in and bolted. Marissa didn't chase him. Not openly. She tried to maintain appearances online, posting filtered photos, captions about self-care and growth. But the facade was thinner now, brittle. Behind closed doors, her world was crumbling. And I wasn't finished. I reached into the folder on my laptop marked Employer. Months earlier, when she still pretended to be focused on her career, she had landed a contract position at a marketing firm. Flexible hours, remote projects. She loved telling people about it, how it gave her freedom to pursue her passions. What she didn't realize was that contracts are fragile, and reputation's fragile still. One of the anonymous envelopes I sent had gone to her supervisor. Not slander, not accusations. Just a carefully selected set of screenshots showing her nights out, timestamps overlapping with work deadlines she had missed, and a discreet note suggesting she wasn't committed. I never signed my name. 2 weeks later, she lost the contract. I didn't rejoice loudly. I didn't even allow myself a smirk in public. But when I sat alone in my rental, staring at the glow of my laptop, I felt a deep satisfaction. Not joy, not even revenge in the dramatic sense. Just balance. A weight redistributed. Her life continued to shrink. Bills overdue. Friends distant. Lover gone. Career stalled. The final straw, however, wasn't financial or social. It was personal, and it exposed the truth she had tried hardest to bury. Marissa had always leaned on her family for validation. She adored posting photos with her parents, long captions about family values, curated snapshots that painted her as the loyal daughter. But the envelopes I sent had disrupted that carefully built image. Her mother confronted her in private. Neighbors overheard. Her father, a man of traditional pride, was said to have told her she was throwing her life away for a fling. And then, she did something predictable. She tried to spin the narrative back around. She called me. The number lit up my phone late on a Sunday night. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her tone was uneven, half anger, half desperation. She said I was cruel for leaving, accused me of orchestrating her collapse, then slipped into pleading. She wanted to talk it through, to clear the air. I saved the voicemail but never responded. Instead, I listened to it again and again, not for the words but for the cadence. It was the sound of someone who realized the foundation was gone. She wasn't in control anymore. Gregory's name came up again in whispers later. He had filed a restraining order, claiming she harassed him after he left. I didn't have proof beyond the courthouse record, but it fit perfectly. The woman who once shouted her triumph in my face was now branded unstable, desperate, and abandoned by the very man she had chosen over me. The irony was bitterly beautiful. For me, life was quieter, steadier. I focused on work, took on projects I had been neglecting, even started attending the gym again. My phone buzzed with messages from friends who had once been ours, but now leaned toward me, saying they admired how calm I'd been, how I took the high road. I didn't correct them. They didn't need to know the truth, that every step of her collapse had been nudged by my unseen hand. Marissa's unraveling wasn't theatrical. It wasn't a single dramatic explosion. It was the slow peeling away of layers until she stood alone, stripped of the things she thought made her untouchable. And as she stood there, in the ruins of her own making, I wasn't angry anymore. I was patient, because the final act hadn't arrived yet. The part where she would crawl back, convinced that the man she once dismissed could still be her salvation. And when that moment came, I was ready to let karma deliver the finishing blow. The first time Marissa appeared at my door, I almost didn't recognize her. It had been nearly 2 months since I walked out of that apartment, since the night she brought Gregory into our bed and found me waiting. 2 months of silence, during which her life quietly collapsed under the weight of her own decisions. She looked thinner, not in the flattering way she once obsessed over, but in the hollow-eyed, restless sort of way that speaks of sleepless nights. Her hair was tied back hastily, no polished curls or careful styling, and the clothes she wore seemed thrown on, wrinkled, mismatched. For a moment, I thought she might be lost. But then her eyes lifted, and I saw it. Recognition, desperation, and the faint trace of entitlement that had never really left her. She started speaking before I could. No greeting, no pause. Just a spill of words. How she'd made mistakes. How she wasn't herself back then. How she wanted to talk, to make sense of things. Her tone pitched somewhere between apology and accusation, as though she was both victim and villain in the same breath. I listened, leaning against the doorway, arms folded. My silence seemed to unsettle her more than anger would have. She kept shifting, glancing down at her shoes, then up again, testing my expression for softness. But I felt nothing. No urge to take her in, no flicker of sympathy. Just the cold clarity of a man who had already buried the part of himself that once loved her. Finally, when her words faltered, I spoke. My voice was even, deliberate. You told me someone else satisfied you in ways I never could. Maybe you should go find him. Her lips trembled, but no sound came. For the first time, she seemed to realize the permanence of what she had done. I stepped back inside and closed the door, leaving her in the hallway. That could have been the end. A clean rejection, a door closed forever. But people like Marissa don't give up on control so easily. Within days, she returned. Once at my workplace, waiting in the lobby until security asked her to leave. Another time outside the rental apartment, pacing near the entrance with her phone clutched like a lifeline. Each time, she tried new tactics, tears, anger, flattery, bargaining. She told me she had changed. She told me Gregory had tricked her. She told me her parents misunderstood. She even tried guilt, saying I had ruined her chances at work by spreading lies. I never raised my voice. I never argued. I let her talk until she ran out of excuses, then walked away. That restraint burned her more than confrontation ever could. Because silence, I had learned, is the loudest weapon. Her third attempt came late at night. I woke to the sound of soft knocks on my door. When I opened it, she was there, mascara smeared, clutching a crumpled stack of envelopes, past due bills, late notices, final warnings. She shoved them toward me like evidence, her eyes wild. I can't do this alone, she whispered. I didn't take the papers. Instead, I nodded slowly, as if acknowledging a truth she had long denied. You wanted independence. Now you have it. And then I closed the door again. That was the last time she showed up in person. From then on, the consequences unfolded without my presence. Eviction notices. A court record of Gregory's restraining order, visible to anyone willing to search. Social media posts stripped of friends, likes, comments. Her once polished life reduced to fragments scattered across public record and whispered gossip. The woman who once screamed in triumph that another man satisfied her better, now couldn't even convince her landlord to give her a week's extension. Meanwhile, my life grew steadier. I wasn't suddenly wealthy or celebrated, but I was free. My job, once just a paycheck, became an anchor. I poured energy into it, climbing toward a promotion. I met new people outside the shadow of her world, building friendships that weren't poisoned by deceit. For the first time in years, my evenings belonged entirely to me. One evening, months later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance. Marissa had moved back in with her parents after the eviction. Her father had made it clear, no financial bailouts. If she wanted stability again, she would have to earn it. But jobs were harder to come by now, especially with her reputation stained and references withdrawn. Gregory, from what I gathered, had cut ties completely. Word was, he moved to another city, perhaps to escape the mess she had tried to drag him into. I didn't care enough to confirm. His role in the story was finished. The true irony came when I learned she was warning other people about toxic partners, casting herself as a survivor of manipulation. She never named me outright, but the insinuation was there. Yet nobody seemed convinced. Too many people had seen the truth unfold piece by piece. Her credibility was gone, not because of my words, but because of her own. And that, I realized, was the essence of karma. It wasn't about dramatic revenge scenes or explosive confrontations. It was about watching someone's choices circle back until they were cornered by the consequences they once thought they were immune to. For me, closure wasn't a single moment. It wasn't slamming a door in her face or hearing about her eviction. It was the slow understanding that I didn't need to act anymore. Karma had taken over, and it was more ruthless than anything I could have orchestrated. Months stretched into a year. By then, I had moved into a new apartment of my own. Bright, uncluttered, free of ghosts. I met someone new, Hannah, a coworker who valued honesty over theatrics, patience over drama. With her, conversations were simple, evenings calm, and trust unshaken. I never told Hannah the full story of Marissa, at least, not in detail. All she knew was that I had been engaged once, and it had ended badly. That was enough. The past didn't define me anymore. But sometimes, late at night, I'd remember that shout, that raw moment when Marissa bared her betrayal in the cruelest way possible. And I would think about how different the story might have been if I had reacted with rage, or if I had begged, or if I had clung to her. Instead, I chose silence. I chose patience. I chose to wait in the dark, to dismantle ties one by one, to let her trap close around herself. And in the end, she destroyed herself far more thoroughly than I ever could have. That was the final lesson she gave me, that the cruelest revenge is not what you do to someone, but what you allow them to do to themselves when their true nature is exposed. So when I think of her now, I don't feel anger or sadness. I feel nothing at all. She shouted once that another man satisfied her better. Now, she has nothing left but the echo of her own words. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.